Okay.
Wonderful. Hello and welcome again to another video with myself, JeniferTaylor from Mountain Mowbray. Today I am very honoured to welcome and to chat to is Thomas Sheridan. A lot of people who listen to my videos know I mention him quite a lot, as do a lot of my friends. I've came across Thomas back, I think in 2018 or 2019. I've got several of his books, and he's just been one of those down-to-earth, grounded. I always describe him as a down-to-earth, grounded Irishman, and I always go back to what he has to share to keep myself quite, for a better word, grounded. But I wanted to speak to Thomas about the whole New Age storyline that has kept us a little bit down that cul-de-sac. And once you start to kind of like wake up from that story, you're then left with questioning, well, what is this reality? What powers do we have? Who are we? And that's why I wanted to speak to Thomas. But before we continue, I'd like to hand it over to Thomas for him to introduce himself to you. So Thomas, thank you.
Hi, Jennifer. Glad to be here. I live in Ireland. I was born in Dublin. I've worked around the world. I've traveled a lot. I started taking an interest in the esoteric, occult, ancient sites, 7, 8, 9. When it started with things like, funny enough, you mentioned like, gateway things. So Eric von Daniken books when I was a little kid, and that sort of opened up my world too with alternative thinking. And it's been like that ever since. I've worked in Wall Street. I've worked at building sites. In 2010, I wrote a book called Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath, which became a bestseller and gave me this life I have now of being able to write and talk, and allowed me to get out of the system so I didn't need a regular job. Well, I do have a regular job, but it's only part-time now. It's just to keep my foot in the normal world. And I'm very interested in the meaning of life. I'm a pagan, a practicing pagan, but not a neo-pagan. I don't believe in this cosplay throwback paganism. That's straight out of the New Age as well. Pagan people should look like anyone else in society. We should fit in and not play games at the weekend, whatever, or at the festivals. I have written several books on everything from outside corporate psychopathy. I've written books on mind control, sorcery, ancient sites, both in Ireland and around the world, occultism in the first part of the 20th century in Germany. And I'm currently about to publish a book with Sarah Mondaini, my colleague from the Hocus Focus program, on her channel, called about our own attitude towards hauntology and Forteanism. So I've always kind of like been in that world. I've never been out of it. Even when I wrote books on psychopathy, I pulled heavily on the work of Joseph Campbell and Bruno Bettelheim, and spoke about like what's the real meaning of entities such as Lucifer and demons and so on. How does it relate to this topic, the jinn, this kind of thing? So I've always had my foot very deeply in that world. So from an early age, so I never had, I avoided a lot of the pitfalls, I think, just because I started young. It gave me an advantage. And I was kind of like, I had a very normal life, or paying bills, that kind of thing. And I had that kind of world. But I also had this esoteric world, which I kept to myself. I didn't make a career or a deal out of it. When I lived in New York, I got involved. I used to spend time in the alchemists. The Magical Child bookshop and places like that. I got to know chaos magicians. I got to know people through the Discordia scene. All very low key. I wasn't like, I'm on a mystical journey. It was very much an extension of my paganism, looking into the esoteric and the occult.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. So can we dive into, I mean, I've started reading this book. I've had it since 2019. I'm terrible at buy books. And when Ola speaks about, I'm not sure how Raganoff, that series, you know, how the gods used water and weapons and destroyed Atlantis, and Atlantis fell. And I didn't realize that England was attached to Europe as well. So if we can just jump into the New Age, it was created as a cul-de-sac, wasn't it? As people started to look for something, like, because the church is lost its hold.
Kind of, yeah, kind of. I think it was an accidental psyop rather than a committee sat down one day and decided we've lost Christianity, let's give them something new. I think it was more of an accidental psyop. Firstly, I want to state that is that there's absolutely nothing wrong with anyone going on a spiritual journey and learning things. And if they stumble through the New Age things, there's absolutely no harm in that. It's part, you can, you know, maybe you've been taken for a ride by some phonies or some, you know, gurus or, you know, plastic shamans or druids and all that stuff. That's part of the process. Consider it part of your initiation, that when you come out the other side, that you've passed a kind of a test. Now, there's, like I said, there's nothing wrong with people developing an interest in these things. The problem is that because there's so much money involved in it, there's lots of traps, there's lots of deceptions. You won't become a shaman by banging a drum on a weekend course in Glastonbury. You know, you won't become a shaman. You won't become, you know, an expert in, you won't become a Native American, you know, medicine woman or person with a weekend in a, you know, a sweat lodge in Sedona. It doesn't work like that. There's far too many people going around calling themselves druids, shamans, and, you know, witches and everything else, and they're nothing of the sort. In fact, they'd probably be the first ones to be sacrificed back in those days. So there's a lot of that goes on, and well, the biggest problem I have with the New Age is, and I know that there's a very complex history that came into it, but actually even that stuff has its merits too. It's, you know, we could talk about that later, but the biggest problem is it denies the shadow. It only wants to see light. Like, for instance, you have all these like women, Wiccan females. I'm not putting down women, as the men are just as bad in all this, going around saying things like, oh, I'm, you know, I relate to Boudica, you know, this kind of thing. I'm a Celtic, I'm like, Boudica's my hero. You know, Boudica killed tens of thousands of innocent Roman women and men, you know, massacred them in British cities, British Roman cities. You know, they never want to. No, they never want to accept that. You know, they never want to. They never want to take that. This is what they're like with everything. They never. You know, they say they think becoming a shaman is banging a drum and taking a workshop. When you turn around and tell them, you know, I'll give you an example. I was a few years ago. It's really funny, this story, but boy, it does illustrate the point I'm making. There was a group of women calling themselves witches on some Facebook group. Harmless enough. Most of them seemed quite well-meaning, but there was this kind of like a central core of like big shots, you know, who kind of set themselves up as kind of like the big shots, right? And so an African guy, witch doctor, came on the group, and he started posting about African magic. And I was going, oh, I really like this guy. This is really interesting stuff. Finally, I'm learning something. And Pete, there was a thing, someone posted a thing say, you know, the woman who ran the group was like, we're so happy to have a real African witch doctor here. We're so proud of our diversity and all this kind of stuff, right? And then someone said, I have a course, how do you remove it? And you have the usual bullshit like, oh, you're born sage or this kind of crap, you know? And which only makes the course worse because it's showing where you are and this kind of thing. And the man from Africa beautifully and succinctly said, no, ladies, how you remove a curse is you stand over a fast flowing stream and you get a black cockerel and you slit his throat and pour the blood into the stream. Well, the place went into psychosis. It went psychotic. And he was instantly banned. We do not support animal cruelty on this forum and in this group. He had actually given them real magic and they couldn't handle it. And that's the biggest problem I have with the New Age.
Yeah, it's all love and light and love your neighbors and positive thinking and don't get angry and it's about the one thing that made me crumble away was like
they do get angry. They get extremely angry because they're
yes,
in the shadow.
yeah. And it was all about manifestation, like the big house, the car and the life you wanted. And it just keeps you in that material realm of of wanting more and what you have got is never enough. And one of the things like from 2020 that's come out of it for me is like my I was a therapist at Ragdale, back-to-back treatments, and now I work 2 days looking after babies. So my money wise, I'm on less money. But life is so much simpler, and so I'm so much more happier. And
Yeah.
it's not about chasing the material things. As long as I've got the money to pay the bills and buy the food and do the things I need to do, I'm never been so happy in all my life and follow my
Yeah,
dreams.
exactly. And there's nothing wrong with chasing the material stuff. There's nothing, once you do it honestly and you want to really work for it, and enjoy it, you can enjoy that stuff too. But you're right. But there's also we shouldn't seek happiness. What we should seek is contentment.
Yes.
That's the greatest lie we were told growing up. You're supposed to be happy. No, a happy person truly is a content person. Contentment is what we really need, and that's what you found, I'd say.
Yeah, contentment. Yeah, because now I'm doing things that I never would have been able to do when I was at Ragdale, like making these videos, talking to people like you, do my art. Yeah, and it's weird, isn't it? It like contentment. That is what it is, and that's how I feel, and never been so happy. Thank you. So also, like someone asked me from one of the videos, it's like about spirit guides, because I know when I listen to Tony Sayers, he says we shouldn't reach out to spirit guides. What's your view on spirit guides? Because you open yourself up to a world that because like you said, it's not all about, there's not like floating around loads of good spirits. There are some demonic spirits too, aren't there?
They're nearly all demonic. Anyone who has a spirit guide is always dealing with a demon. Anyone who works in reiki is working with demons. That's always been, the Japanese don't even hide that. Reiki is a demon working system. It's a grimoire, basically. It's a grimoire of the body and body energies to summon demons to help you find or remove demons or find demons that actually find your ailment inside you. They're low-level entities. The only people that can summon a whole, first of all, right, you cannot summon a holy guardian angel or an advanced spirit if you're a mortal. It would be like an ant demanding an audience with the president of the United States. Okay.
Yeah.
But these people will go, I invoke this angel or I invoke this ascendant master. That's narcissism of an extreme. Even the Pope doesn't think he can invoke the Archangel Gabriel, right? So that's extreme narcissism. Now, that's not to say these things do not appear to people. Oh my God, they absolutely have. But it's not something you do chanting or wishing or thinking you have. I know I'm not doing this to hurt people's feelings or to make them feel bad. The only spirits that you're in contact with, that if you think you're genuine in contact with a spirit, is a low-level demon that's lying to you, and there's nothing else. Anyone who's studied the occult to any depth, magic to any depth, knows there are certain things that are like firing a flare gun into the ether, and it attracts the lowest level entities towards you. And there are things like calling yourself a goddess in this kind of nonsense. And you're saying you're in contact with divine beings. These people are saturated and polluted with demons. You've all been to these New Age courses where you had some person going, a man or a female going, I am an ascendant being. And they all think, oh, and then you go back later, why did that feel funny? Because that room was saturated in demonic entities. That's why. That's why you feel this way. And that's what you're dealing with. And in indigenous magical traditions, everything from paganism to Santeria to proper shamanism to proper Eastern occultism, you name it, they absolutely know they're demons, but they use them. They take advantage of them. But they don't believe, the demons are not able to con them into believing that it's an angel or an ascended master or some alien space being or your Aunt Mary when you open up the Ouija board. These pieces of shit will tell you anything you want to hear in order to get into you. They are the ultimate liars and deceivers, and they will play on your ego and your narcissism, which every single one of us has. And they will find that don't kid yourself that you don't have an ego or you don't have a narcissism. The fact that you actually even think that you're in contact with an ascended master and angel shows that you've got an ego that's as big as the world. You're already proving that to them. Where a person who's humble will not think that way. This idea of being able to contact these supreme beings is just nonsense. It's insulting. It's like the way pagan ancestors didn't actually invoke gods. They petitioned them, they sacrificed to them, but to act for a mortal, for how many parables and stories, from Arachne to Prometheus, that warn us that mortals should not actually compare themselves to the great gods or to the great beings. They will be horrifically punished for their, insolence. And that's what's happening there. And these people are in mortal danger. They're damaging their souls because someone tells them that that's their what you call it, their ascended master or whatever. And it's not. It's a low-level demon. And in every case, unless you're some kind of remarkable person who can really do it. And let me tell you, they come along once every couple of 100 years.
Hmm. Can we get in contact with our loved ones in the spirit world? What's your thoughts on that?
During Bardo, the period before they I totally agree with the theosophist attitude towards this, because it makes a lot of sense, and it has a lot of sort of evidential comparative folklore from around the world and spiritual and theological folklore, that when someone dies, they're in a state of Bardo for about 2 weeks, right? And they're on this earth, they're around you. If they want, they can. Then something happens, and normally they're reincarnated. But if they're at the end of the reincarnation cycle, which actually doesn't happen that often as people think, you're reincarnated again. They can be reached, and this was proven quite effectively in the early 1900s when spiritualists started to try to contact people, and they could only contact educated people who went to school. This would be like around late 1800s. And they were amazed that they couldn't contact poor people. And they were saying, so maybe we're being deceived here. And what they figured out that during Bardo, these poor people couldn't read and write. So they couldn't make letters move on a table or something the way an educated person would.
Oh, yeah.
So that was actually the proof that Bardo exists, that they were actually able to find other means of contact, letting people who were because they were using the alphabet for illiterate people, poor people who never went to school. And it was only the middle class and upper class who were able to say, no, this is me, I'm here, I'm okay, don't worry, I'll be leaving soon. And they always, it's legit when they say, I'm leaving soon, if they're stuck around. But if your Auntie Mary died in 1976 and you're talking to her on a Ouija board, low-level demon.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because
Or,
I listen to a lot. There's Stephen Strong in Australia, and he said like when our loved ones die, our ancestors, they're going off to the next world or the next adventure. So you just leave them alone and let them get on with it. And that's all struck in my mind. And the
yeah,
thing about
I would agree with that. That's actually that's wise counsel, except
yeah.
sometimes they want to talk to us,
Ah,
but it only will be for a week or two. That's
right.
that's the window.
Right, because
Yeah.
you know, like when you do go and see mediums, they never tell you anything juicy, do they? It's always like you ring us in the cupboard. I'm sending you roses because I love you, but they never actually tell you what it's like where they are now, or give you any hard facts, do they? And that's because that we're not dealing with our loved ones in the spirit world. We're dealing with demons, aren't we?
Well, the cold readings are all liars as well, because I saw one in Ireland that I'd seen in America. James Van Prague. He's quite famous as a medium, and in America he was in New York, and he was naming all Jewish names. Is there a Manny Goldberg in the audience? Is there a um, Ethel Levine, I kept saying that. Well, then I saw him in Ireland a few years later, and he goes, "The name Sinead is coming true. Siobhan, I'm seeing something like a rosary or a holy medal. They're just total scammers, you know what I mean?" But there's another side to that. You can say, well, if they're giving comfort to people who are heartbroken, is it really bad? So,
Mm.
there's another side to that as well.
Yeah. Because I went to see a medium, and she described my mum to a T and my dad to a T, and said things about my family, like she named names. So like my half brother Stuart, and she says you've got to fill in that application form because the job's yours at Ragdale. How how does that work? Are some people psychic?
Everyone's psychic. You're psychic. I'm psychic. Everyone's psychic. But psychic is like a muscle you train it, and it
Yeah.
doesn't. Its purpose is, you psychic. Yeah, everyone's psychic. Everyone has clairvoyant powers to some degree, but you have to work. You can work and actually make it better. Absolutely, 100%. That's real.
Oh,
The CIA even proved that completely with their gateway process, where they basically came with the conclusion that the paranormal world or the psychic world is very, very real.
wow. So psychic abilities is real.
Yeah, if you get the book that I have coming out with Sarah Mondaini called Hocus Focus, there's a whole chapter on the gateway process and the Monroe Institute, proving conclusively that the people have psychic powers. Some are better than others, but yeah, it's real.
Brilliant. So mediums are they come from a good place because I've got
Well,
some
no,
really
no. Well, mediums can be legit if the person recently died.
got you.
But if
Got
they
you.
died a year ago or 5 years ago, it's lies, or it's demons lying.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I'm gonna listen back to our video so I can write this all down.
And again, the part that will choose to contact you, and that gentleman that you had cited is correct. Leave them alone until they decide to contact you, and only believe it if it's in the first week or two.
Got you. One of the things I found very comforting when I was in the New Age bubble was like that we've been watched over and protected, but because right from an early age, before like must have been about 4, I used to look up at the stars, the sky, and I used to believe I came from the sky. But I always noticed all throughout my life that something was protecting me, something was watching over me. Is that part of me that was protecting
Yeah,
me?
that's your daemon. That's your daemon. That's your lower poles of cognition. That's your daemon inside you, the other side of you that exists, the daemon. That's inside you. That's your what people nowadays call the higher self, what the ancient Greeks called the daemon, which
Oh,
translates as the genius. This is also the domain of psychic experiences and intuitions and clairvoyance and premonitions and dreams. That's your daemon. And yeah, absolutely, that's not another being. That's another part of you.
Wow, really?
Yeah. In paganism, the gods, paganism is very, very universal all over the world in the same way. The gods do not interfere in human life one way or another. They're in terms of like, they don't to protect us. They interfere to do things, but they don't do it to protect us. They're like forces of nature, right? You can live in the countryside and you can grow beautiful fruit and vegetables, right? And then one year something happens and there's a blight and the potatoes the crops are all wiped out by a disease and you starve. Now, is that the fault of nature? Is that the fault of the field? No, it's just happened. The gods move in mysterious ways. And then you say, well, the gods have abandoned me. No, they didn't abandon you. They were never interested in you. You were given free will in order to survive, to make your way through this reality. You're not to have a God hold your hand or work you like a puppet master. Even the Judeo-Christians, sort of believe that with the concept of, with the devil, with their Shaitan, the ancient sort of like Semitic concept of an opposer who works you if you're not a Shaitan, if you're not Shaitanic yourself. Yeah, so that's your internal self. That's your higher daemon. And Anthony Peake wrote a great book called The Daemon, all about that. This is the part of you that's really what you think is the higher, the God, the guardian angel. It's you. It's inside you. It's where your intuition and your sudden eureka moments come from, where it's the part of you that tells you don't go around this corner, and then you find out later on it was a terrible car accident there. That's your daemon. Your daemon does not exist in this space-time. It operates outside human space-time, and therefore it can be used to actually see into the future or to see things that your physical body can't see. And it conveys it to you in terms of allegory, usually during dreams, but often through intuitions and insights.
How do you spell that, Daemon?
Daemon.
Daemon. I like that. I don't like the word higher self. I've never liked the word higher self.
Yeah, but that's what they're really saying. The Greeks call it a daemon, and it's the same concept. There's another part of you inside you.
Wow. And as a child, because it was so strong, so utterly strong, and then when I went to Australia, it never kind of like felt so strong. And then I came back to England and it really kicked in. I mean, I got myself into, like, if you think it was 1985, arrived back in England after going to an all-girls school in Australia. It's like how I, had I not listened to my inner voice and into my daemon, I would have got myself in right strife. So that makes that.
Hold on a second. There's another aspect to this too as well.
Okay.
Things worked out when you got back to England because you had been returned to your ancestral codes. Europeans should not be in Australia. There's an Australian comedian, Steve Hughes, a friend of mine. He says Australians walk around going, "What are we doing here? I don't know." It's like, how did we end up? I don't know. End up here? I don't know. You are bonded to your ancestral land. This is one of the great evils of diversity and mass immigration, is that people don't really settle in their new land. And when I lived in America, I always longed for Ireland. And I was not, Mr. Super Patriotic or anything like that. I felt that there was an umbilical cord. And it's not just Ireland, it's Europe. We're all connected to Europe. All us Europeans are directly connected to Europe. That's our ancestral soul that travels in our DNA. And Aborigines are ancestrally connected to Australia, and Semitic people to the Arabic world, to the Middle East. And they're doing a great disservice moving all these large numbers of people all over the world, because they're taking them from their ancestral codes and putting them in a place where they're not suited for it. Now, if they're mixed race, they can actually survive, no problem. You see, this is a very controversial subject, but you carry a racial soul. Well, I shouldn't say racial soul, because that comes with a load of kind of baggage. A tribal soul inside you, okay? A tribal, and your ancestry was European. Doesn't matter if it was English or Scottish or Irish or whatever, French, Norman, whatever, Viking. I'm a mixture of all that stuff, right? It's still European. It's still on this continent. It's still the Proto-European people, the Indo-European people. this is where I belong. This is why I'm just as comfortable in, you know, Avebury as I am in Tara, as I am in, you know, the somewhere in, Tarjem in Malta, or in, Greece, or in Norway. I mean, that's my European soul. The Indo-European soul is connected to that. And you can't escape it. You can try all you like. You can but it never works. It never works for anybody. It damages people. You are bonded to the land. You are bonded to the land of your ancestors, to where they fermented. And us Europeans, we came out of the central steppes of Eurasia about 6,500 years ago and spread through Europe. And we've been, and then before that was the Proto-Europeans. That's where we belong. This is where, so there's a lot, and it doesn't matter where, human beings originally came from millions of years ago. The actual connection to the land of your ancestors is so important. And that's why you felt better when you came back home.
Because everyone says to me, why did you come back? And I'm like, well, the moment I left England, I was homesick, and I stayed there for 7 years. And as soon as I finished high school, I was back home again. And yeah, and that explains why I felt I actually did shut down, had it not been for high school, I couldn't connect to the land. I couldn't, no, gosh, thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love America. The 11 years I lived there, I thought New York was amazing. I loved traveling to the United States. I loved American people. I loved American culture. I just was, but there was a point that changed things. When the Bush and the neocons took over, they did something to the soul of the American soul, and changed America. And suddenly America, it was the excitement and the sheer amazing fantasticness of America that kept me loving it. And then one day it was like being with a beautiful woman for 5 years, and you wake up and say, she's still beautiful, she's still a really nice person, but we're not really meant to be together any longer. And that's okay. And that's what it was like,
Yeah. Because slightly different question here. In Australia, from my history that I was taught in Australia, it was the Danish that went there, and then like English. How come Australia has terms like, they have the dollar, they have a lot of words that are same to America, like we have nurseries in England. Why has it got such a American influence on Australia?
Yeah, because you've no culture of their own, so they have to kind of invent one, and the nearest one to invent to kind of like take from is American pop and Hollywood culture. That's it. That's the only reason.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
If you went to Australia back in the 1930s and 40s, they would all be very British. I remember there was a soap opera TV show. It was like the Australian version of the Waltons. Remember the Waltons, or Little House on the Prairie? And it was called The Sullivans, and it was set in 1930s Australia, and it was based on a true story of a real family. And they were all like very British, very English, very Celtic, very Irish, very these islands, And then after World War II, the Australians started looking to the Americans for their influence. When you don't have a culture, you'll try to adopt another culture that's currently in vogue. It's the same way like when the way that the Britons, so many of them became Romans during the Roman period. There was so much displacement during the Roman period that eventually Britain started, and Romans started becoming British. And it's an interesting thing. And this is why the Romans started, venerating Celtic gods. And the Celtic peoples of Britain started venerating Roman gods like Minerva. What you think is better at the time will appeal to you, especially if you feel a little lost. That's also what brings people into the New Age.
Yes. Yeah, very true. Right. Another question is, sorry, because you've shared so much, and I'm like, oh my God, it explains so much. Synchronicity. What's your thoughts on synchronicity?
It's absolutely one of the most powerful devices we can use to grow our charisma If you want to really become a spiritual person, right, quote unquote, in the small quotes, develop your charisma. Now, charisma is a Greek term meaning the grace of the gods. And what it means is being true to yourself. And if you're true to yourself, you will not interfere with the natural working, the natural law of the universe, and therefore things will happen for you. So for instance, if you're in a marriage and you're not happy and you hate it, it will never be happy. Everything will go wrong until the day you say, I have to man up or woman up about this and leave this marriage, or leave this job, or leave this country, or leave this town. Then because it's not working and I'm making something that doesn't work not work. And as soon as you do that, synchronicities begin to happen. Okay. So you're in a bad marriage and you've got the financial worries. You suddenly one day, and you make the decision, I'm out of this bad marriage. It's not good for any, and you do it for the right reasons. You say it's not healthy for any. He's happy, she's not happy. Well, none of us are happy, and the kids are growing up. We don't need to put them through this anymore. And then suddenly, as you make that you man up or woman up and make that decision, the synchronicities start happening. You say, how am I ever going to get this divorce? Suddenly, you meet a person one day you're friends with and go, oh, my brother James is a divorce lawyer. He'll help you. These things, the universe, all the inhibitors to what this is what magic really is, removing the inhibitors between you and your will. And charismatic trajectory is the easiest way to do that. Be true to yourself. If you don't like someone, you don't like him. If you hate someone, it's okay to hate them for a while. Don't wrap your whole life around in it. If you find someone detestable, cool, no problem. Just feel that way. Don't go, I must love him because that's what Jesus or the Buddha would want. That's when everything will turn to shit for you. Your charisma is about being in alignment with natural law. Now, one of the reasons you find out you're in alignment with natural law is synchronicities, coincidences that have incredible power and meaning, and they shouldn't have never really happened, ever. That's the universe or the natural or the gods, if you're a pagan or whatever you want to call it, and your Daemon, telling you you're on the right path. Synchronicities are you being told you're on the right path. Keep following this. Keep following this. So, say if you're, a young person and you want to start a band, you just by sheer million chance to one, you walking down the street one day and you see you say to yourself, I'm going to start a band. And you turn the corner and there's a poster for maybe a Mars bars or anything. And someone's holding a guitar and it says, your dreams will come true. Bam, synchronicity. Now you can get obsessive about it. You can say, but it is real if you're very careful about it. And or you say something like, there's lots of things. People have had these experiences all their lives and they don't even know them. They say, the most amazing thing happened to me. I went into work and they were laying off 40 people and I didn't lose my job because I was 41. And you know what I saw right before I walked in? A car was parked at the street and the only thing on its license plate was a customized license plate that said U41. And I was 41. I didn't get laid off. That's synchronicity. That's the universe telling you you're okay. Stick to the path. Stick to this course. And as you do that, you build your charisma. When you build your charisma, you will find that the inhibitors to your desires start falling away slowly. This is what magic really is about, the development of the spiritual self, not about controlling others or getting what you want. You will get these things if you let the inhibitors fall away from your eyes, fall away from and the synchronicities come along and bang, you go, wow, I'm on the right path. Synchronicity is the most powerful thing ever. And but don't become obsessed with it. you know, if you have this thing with the number 40 or the number 20 and you start that looking for 20s, and that's not how it works. It doesn't work like that. It will
Yeah.
be in the most amazing thing, you know, and the chances of it happening will be billions to one, but it happens at pivotal moments.
Yeah, I was with my friend Donna, and I was talking about like thinking, oh, maybe I ought to return to Ragdale because I'm a therapist. That's what my path. And we're in this chit chat, and then I got my car and drove, and I attached my phone to the car, and it plays music randomly. So the first track it said was "Leave the Past Behind," and I thought, that's a sign. What are the chances of that piece of music coming on? Leave the past behind. So I thought, no, Ragdale doors closed, keep moving.
Yep.
And one of the things I've listened to you talk about fairies over the years, and you hold a huge amount of respect and understanding to the fairies, don't you?
Well, it comes from my ancestry. Well, I'm also afraid of them. I don't mess with them, you know. You see, in Ireland, we don't have the Fae. The Fae are English, okay? They're English fairies. In Ireland, we have the She, Sidhe, pronounced She, like Shee. And they're a very different brand of fairies altogether, and you do not mess with them. And a lot of them are, you know, kind of hostile to humans. My grandmother terrified us as kids when I was a little kid, telling us she grew up. She was and she was an educated woman, and she grew up in the bogs of Ireland, like in the middle of nowhere, you know, in a middle class family. And she used to terrify us with stories of the banshee and all the, you know, the puka and this kind of lian and she and all these like dark fairies. And her aunt had seen a fairy one day coming home from her friend's house and was traumatized by it and this kind of thing. So, you know, when people, you know, when you hear people talk, you see, in Ireland and Scotland, you have the she. In England, you have the fae. They're different racial groups. They're different races of fairies. You do not encroach in their world. You don't think you have the ability to contact them, but they're very real. They're other forms of consciousness, other beings that exist outside our perception, and they exist everywhere in every culture.
More real than angels, then.
Well, angels are definitely, well, you see, the thing with, well, that's absolutely the she are real because they're in your neighborhood. They're not up in the clouds, right? For starters, right? They're in the hedgerow at the end of the garden in many cases. They're, you know, they could be down by a river near where you live, and they'll take an interest in you. For instance, like in Ireland, when English women were living here and got pregnant, the she were always very interested in them. One, because they were foreigners, and two, they were pregnant. So like, and then when that happens, you know, you're off in the woods someday and you're pregnant and you hear you're a foreign woman living in a foreign country. I have a friend in Italy who's Belgian and got Tina Kemp. You should check out her channel. She was pregnant in Belgium and she made a video about like suddenly she was in the fairy grove one day, Italian fairies, and they go like this. No, I'm joking. But Italian fairies were very interested in her because she was a foreign lady and she was pregnant. And I said to her, go home, immediately go home and don't encourage them because they're after the baby. They're fascinated by children, changelings, and all this kind of thing. It's a very deep thing in Irish folklore that the baby being swapped with a baby with a fairy. So I said they won't do it, but they're fascinated by foreign women where they live being pregnant. They're fascinated. They're fascinated by the fact that you're foreign, but they're extra fascinated as a woman who gets pregnant. And so, like, there's a huge corpus of Irish folklore. Fairy folklore in Ireland, but the she is staggering, you know, like the complexity of it and the depth of it. In fact, in the 1930s, the Irish government did, when the country was newly independent, the Irish government did a folklore collection. It was one of the most amazing things ever. They went to every primary school in the country and asked the kids to write down their local folklore. And it's become this enormous, amazing collection in in the government archives. I found out that the primary school just down the road here, the kids had wrote about the fairies live around here. They live by the well, and the well is in my back garden now. So that's how real it is, you know. That's how real it is. And yeah, they're real. They exist. The angels, well, angels kind of come from a pagan kind of thing. Again, you know, Greek and Roman, and it's also sort of like it comes out of Jewish paganism that existed before, you know, monotheistic Judaism, when you had like the old pagan kings at Gehenna in Israel. In fact, paganism is starting to grow again in big time in Israel. So there, you know, so the angels is kind of like from that kind of folklore, and they're also the Sibyls and the other sort of like, you know, intermediate beings within the pagan Hellenic and Roman pantheon. So they kind of fall into the same thing in a way, you know, kind of in a way.
Yeah.
So but the idea that you can contact them and they work for you, that's nonsense.
Yeah. 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 Because yeah. I've actually made a fairy garden for my granddaughter in my garden. Is that a good idea or not?
It's not. I wouldn't do it if you had someone who was pregnant in the house, a female was pregnant. But otherwise, it's harmless, completely harmless.
Oh, good. Because it's just a little house, and it's just putting some of the magic in the garden. That's why I
Yeah,
created it.
totally harmless. But like, if you had someone in the house who was pregnant, I would take it away.
Right. Okay. I'll remember that when my daughter gets pregnant again. And like I've also started making like little fairy doors. Is that kind of like harmless or my
Completely harmless, and it's a sweet thing. Kids love it. I mean, the lovely forest walk where I live here, and all the kids made little fairy houses and little fairy doors and stuff, and it's completely harmless. It's keeping our Celtic, pagan, Anglo-Saxon folklore alive. You know, why not?
brilliant? Brilliant. What else did I want to ask you? Just bear with me 1 second. Oh yes, yes. So one of the other things, a lots of them are talking about is how there's been a filament put over this realm that we live on, and astrology is not what people think it is, and the planets control us, and that we have no such thing as free will. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, that's not astrology. Astrology doesn't control your free will. The planets don't control your free will. They provide pointers. Astrology is absolutely real. There's no doubt about it, but it's only
Yes, real.
very few serious astrologers. You know, there's almost, you know, the New Age astrologers are all full of shit, but there's, you know, the Vedic, the Chinese and the Vedic Indians take it very seriously. You know, astrology is very real if it's done properly. The planets don't rule our lives. They're like the gods. They have potentials, and they show times, places of opportunity, and uh, they uh, they are almost like cosmic counsel to help us. I can recommend two very good astrologers online. Fiona Agar, she's Irish, Fiona A. I think I can't remember her second name now, but AGADGHAR something like that. I'll pop it up and send to you later. And Sun Moon Self with Olivia. She's a Hungarian lady living in Germany. These are very serious, proper astrologers who've done the work and have actually, you know, they're not from the New Age world. They're both pagan, of a pagan. One is of a Magyaric background, and the other one is an Irish Celtic pagan, so Nordic pagan. So these people are very serious about it, and they're not, you know, mystic megs or anything like that. Astrology is real, but it doesn't determine your life. It doesn't rule your life. It's you've still got free will. It's just that you know, it helps. It's like, you know, auguries and portents and signs and omens. It's in that world. You're not doomed. You're not fated to them. But they help you deal with things. They create understandings of natural forces and things that are going wrong or like the Mercury retrograde. That stuff is true, but doesn't mean it all goes to shit. If it does go to shit, you know what, you can kind of help work your way around it. You can make contingency to. It's help. You know, that's the way it is. It's help. It's not fate.
Hmm. Um, do you think our lives are predestined?
No,
Good.
No, not at all. Not at all. There's a few things that do this. Mavericks, people who are mavericks, well, predestiny doesn't apply to them. You know, that they go off and live their lives no matter what. That's me, you know. And they do, you know, they follow their own path in life. They break with tradition and family and stuff like that. There's also reincarnation. If it's predestined, why do we reincarnate to try and make, you know, reincarnation is the most common form of afterlife belief on earth. It's only in the Christian and the Abrahamic world that we think it doesn't exist, but everywhere else and our pagan ancestors all believed in it. So if there was no free will, why are you given a chance to fix it up in the next life? You know, so it's not. I don't believe in that at all. There's no proof of it. Now, if you interfere with natural law, i.e., the gods, and you try to start thinking, you know, you're a god or you've got great powers, and you don't, you will get ass whipped, and you will be put into a situation where you will be fated to be doomed and profaned.
Yeah, because in the New Age, they say we are all gods. We create our reality.
Well, no, we help create our reality, but we're not gods, you know. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, quantum physics has proven that we do all have a stake in this generation of this thing we call reality. But we don't, it doesn't happen because we're gods. It happens because we have the ability to do it through our nervous system, and we're able to quantify it through our five senses and perceive it and recognize it and stuff like that. But it's part of a natural function of the universe. It's not that we have, you know, we're gods. That's a different level altogether. We have a stake in it. It's like buying into a timeshare. We bought into a timeshare of reality, and we have a stake in how we can do it to it. But it's extremely difficult because the subatomic particles of this reality are so incredibly dense and tight that for a normal human nervous system or will to actually change it is very difficult. But we see it now and again. When, say, for instance, a woman finds has a car accident and finds her young son or daughter trapped under the car. She may be a 100-pound woman, and she's able to pick up a 2-ton Jeep to free her child. She has changed the subatomic because of the sheer intensity of the experience, the fear, the concern, the worry, the fright, the shock. She switches out of this reality and she changes the subatomic density of the Jeep and lifts it up and gets the kid out. So we know that's when it happens. But just think of the work. And now magic is a big part of magic is that. And a big part of shamanism is that, which is why shamans torture and brutalize themselves, why chaos magicians do things like, you know, annihilation gnosis and stuff like this, put a plastic bag over the head and bring themselves close to death. And at the point of absolute terror, then they can release the magic desire, because they pushed themselves outside the dense. They've loosened up the subatomic dense. Sorry, I'm covered in paint here. Hold up, painting. The subatomic density of the quantum field around them.
Right. So, oh gosh, there was something else I was going to ask you, and it went. So obviously, it's not important to ask you. So, getting back outside in nature. No, one of the questions I want to ask, why do you think we're here?
Say that?
I went on about nature, and then I stopped brutally, and I went, why do you think we're here? Why do you think we've reincarnated here?
I think to create experience, to build the universe. The universe does not build itself, and a human consciousness seems to build the universe. And so therefore, every experience we have adds to the totality, the cumulative totality of the generation of the universe that we're in. We're actually building the universe. That's why we're here. How that process came about, who knows? It's one of the great mysteries, but that you know, it's the Maya. It's what the Hindus talk about. We're building the illusion, and for whatever reason, but that's why we're here. Our experiences is a generative act in the fulfillment and the accumulation of the universal experience.
And one of the New Age things that they say about is when we're just, which I'm now wondering, I think I know the answer. But one of the New Age things someone said to me years and years ago, it was like, we're here, and then when we die, we all go back to one, back to God, become one. And I thought, well, surely we come from other places. Sure, we're not all an aspect or spark of the divine God. Do you know what I mean?
Now, and why would you have an individual soul if you were going to go mush back into something?
Yeah, that's
It's another version of Christianity. A lot of the New Age is just Christianity redone with new, ascended masters, Jesus, prophets, saints. We ascend to, we become one, heaven. The great convergence, the rapture. It's over, and the Akashic records, the Bible. This kind of thing. It's just a lot of it is just Christianity. Repackaged for Western minds because it's easy for them to grasp because that's what they're used to. Even the way they do Eastern Tantra, like in Hinduism and Buddhism, it's nothing like the Hinduism, Buddhism in the East. It's the Western Buddhists are the biggest idiots you'll ever meet. They think Buddhism is like, you sit around meditating all day. It's not really a religion; it's philosophy. No, it's a fucking religion. And and let me tell you, I could introduce you to Buddhists in Asia that would absolutely terrify you. It's not all, this kind of thing, Om and all that. That's Eastern Tantra is a very different thing than what the West thinks it is.
another question. Are you all right for time? I don't want to take too much of your time, but it's so fascinating to talk to you. I know, if I remember correctly, you said about Tartaria. There's another lady who's done a big thing on it, the ether, Marseille somebody, but she calls it the white cities, where the gods came and created these white cities. And you can still see, like if you go into London and Buckingham Palace, and she would say Buckingham Palace and the Houses of Parliament were all built on rivers because they harness the power of the water and the ether. Have you heard of Tartaria?
Okay, you're talking about in geomancy here, that
I
certain
know.
locations have certain powers and you can build on them. Well, it's like feng shui in the Chinese philosophy of Taoism. Yeah, that's absolutely true. There are certain, and that exists in every culture in Ireland. In rural Ireland, there was always a tradition never to build a house with a west-facing door because that meant the west was dead. So you always build your house if you could with a east-facing door, if not a north or a south-facing one. But it was preferable to build an east-facing door because the west was dead, because it would bring bad luck on the family. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of truth to that. How you relate to the natural environment around you can actually enhance so you'll find that cities, ancient cities, old cities, were often built on these places or ancient sites were built on these places that had a particular energy about them. And this did things like allow crops to grow better, people to be healthier, and so on. So that's absolutely, that's called geomancy. And, I call it the environomicon. But you're actually bringing the landscape to life, or the locate, and you can do it in cities as well. But there's a lot of truth to that. They weren't built by angels or anything like that, but there's absolutely, the cities. You look at Washington D.C., that was built on a terrible swamp. You'd say, why on earth would they build Washington D.C. in the most inhospitable part of the eastern United States, a mosquito infested horrible swamp, when they had the whole US to build that's what their capital on? The Freemasons are obviously found some kind of energetic thing within Washington D.C. and then they built their temple to the United States there.
Lovely, thank you. And then just to round up this conversation, getting back to nature, this realm or reality or world or whatever you want to call it that we live on is very magical. It is very powerful, isn't it? Like when we step out into nature, the plants, the trees, everything, the animals have all got a wisdom, haven't they?
Yeah, that's animism. That's a central belief within paganism that everything is alive, or everything has a consciousness. Rocks have consciousness. Mountains have the planet is Gaia. In Ireland, the country is called Éire. In Irish, that comes from the goddess Eru. Ireland is actually a goddess to pagans. It's actually a living being, a goddess, not just a piece of land floating in the sea. Absolutely, yeah, 100%. That's real.
Because it is magical where this realm, this land, the Emerald Islands. It is the whole. How do you use the word?
The natural landscape is so beautiful and so overwhelming that it can't be by accident. It's like, you look at the Impressionist painters of France. Yeah, okay, there was two things that made that happen. In the Impressionist painting movement of France is a classic example of magic, right? You had like the likes of Monet and Degas and Brazil and and all these Gauguin, all these painters, and the later ones like Gauguin and Van Gogh. You're like, you had all these painters, right? The reason why their art left such an impression on the world was absolutely a magical thing. Firstly, they were in the right place at the right time, a beautiful place. France was beautiful, so they painted the beauty of France, whether it was the towns or the villages. Or look, if you don't believe that, go look at Monet's paintings of London. It's just stunning. They're stunning. With the sun over the River Thames, and later on Turner, the English painter. But that came about because of a classic magical act. The young people at the right time broke from convention. They left the salons and they started painting plein air, painting outside using canvases. That became about because of Winsor and Newton in England had produced tubes of oil paint that you could take outside with you. That's magic. That's their wand. Their magic wand was the brush. Their magic implements and potions was the Winsor and Newton painting. They went outside and they invented things like pointillism, where they painted in dots rather than strong strokes. They were showing us the subatomic fabric of the universe was made up of points of photons of light. And when you go to see these paintings in the flesh, they blow your mind. Like Monet's paintings of the haystacks. There's one in the Museum of Fine Art in Boston. And I literally almost fainted when I saw this painting in the flesh, how Monet had painted it. It literally is alive. You can never capture that in a photograph. And this was magic. And this is what they did. So they broke from convention. They had a magical desire, a will to change art, and they used the natural beauty of the world to bring that into, realization. And the magical instrument they used, their wand was their paintbrush or their finger, like me, and the Winsor Newton paint was like the potion, was like the magic's, magic is literally in everything when you start looking at it. And it's the combination of the human consciousness in alignment with the natural world or natural law. And that's when it happens. And that's why today we remember Degas, and we remember Monet and Brazil, and we remember not so much Rembrandt, but Van Gogh and Gauguin for that, and Manet for that reason, because they were a kind of a magical school, but we just called it an artistic movement.
Wow. Thank you, Thomas, so much. I need to go away and really digest everything you said. I think one of the things that keeps calling me back is like, I just keep hearing that they say how the myths and the legends talk about the true reality of where we are. And we are moving back, or with the return of the age of Aquarius, the original birthing codes have come back, because we can't continue the way. I think like the 2020 was a wake-up call, wasn't it, for a lot of people?
Yeah, you can leave this in the recording. This is important.
Good, thank you.
I'm a firm believer in that there was a previous advanced civilization, at least one, what we call it, and this part of the world, we call it Atlantis. It's just the name we use for it, but it did exist. And in the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, there was a place called Lemuria. I do believe these places really exist, whatever they were called. And something happened. There's too much evidence to prove that there was an ancient civilization, possibly 12, 13,000 years ago. Something happened. Could have been a pandemic, a real one. It could have been a technological disaster. It could have been a natural thing. We don't know, but it was wiped out. And if you were to ask me what the purpose of people like me today is, more than anything else, my real passion drives me. And I've made a film on Atlantis and written a book on it with my friend Neil MacDonald. My real passion at what drives me now is that there's a mystery to our existence, as a tantalizing mystery. And archaeology alone doesn't allow you to find it. It's a combination of the occult, the esoteric, magic, folklore, mythology, antiquarianism, and archaeology, and other things, folklore, that are giving us a tantalizing insight to a seam of potential richness that's there. Now, this is all the rage now. You have people like Graham Hancock being very famous for it, and lots of other people in recent years have done this. There's a reason for this. I think we're approaching the end of this civilization. It's coming to an end, okay? Now, people will say, well, that's a very ominous thought. It is if you're not ready for it. Remember, the previous civilizations collapsed, but we're still here. You know, the story of the Tuatha Dé Danann in Ireland, they came from the destroyed cities from across the sea. That's Atlantis. You know, the stories and the Mesoamericans have the similar thing. They came from the east. That's Atlantis. And in Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia, the stories of these Lemurians and stuff that came from their destroyed homeland. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that there was an island in the sea. In fact, Britain and Ireland were definitely part of Atlantis. And so was part of Spain and Portugal and large parts of this part of what is now in the Atlantic under the sea. But it was here, and it stretched all the way across the Atlantic as far as the Bahamas. Plato's account, I think, is actually pretty accurate, and the geography and the archaeological finds kind of prove that. It fell apart. Something happened, and maybe you know, and we have Ragnarok within the Nordic tradition, that the old word of the Aesir gods dies, and then the plain of Vigrid rises up out of the North Sea, and we know about Doggerland. And then you have the Vanir gods, and the modern age of man, which Tolkien incorporates into his different ages of Middle Earth and stuff. There's great wisdom there, and it's very comforting, and it's very beautiful to actually live your life in that way. But there's also other things. You have, like, I'm a huge fan of the American author H.P. Lovecraft. I believe he was actually a prophet. And he talks about cosmic forces that basically destroy humanity, but they're not doing it because they hate us. It's just how the universe is. And so my life is all about gathering up these little bits and trying to find this mystery that first popped into my head when I was 10 years old, when they took us inside the passage chamber, the Neolithic passage chamber in Maynooth. Not Maynooth, in Newgrange in Ireland, and they showed us the triple spiral from our ancestors 5,500 years ago on the wall. And my life ever since then has been like, well, what is this really telling us, and what is this really about? And so that's my passion, and I think a lot of us are now interested in this stuff, and perhaps even the New Age as well, is because subconsciously many of us know we're coming towards the end of this cycle. Whatever it is, and I don't think it's something massive like the Kali Yuga, but like a mini Kali Yuga or an aspect of the Kali Yuga. But I do think we're coming to an end of the cycle, and those of us who are kind of waking up are the ones who are going to make it to the other side, if it, when it happens. And it may not be a big catastrophic thing. It may be a slow, gradual collapse. It may be, but things will just go to crap at one point, and it could be a major war. We don't know, but it seems to have happens every 12,000 years, and It could be something from outer space, you know, an asteroid or something. But I think our time is approaching for that to happen again. I know that sounds kind of a bit like Christianity and the revelation, but it's not. It's not, because it's in every single culture. In fact, Christianity actually probably co-opted from Jewish paganism, and also there was plenty of Greek and Roman pagans in the in the Holy Land at that period, who would have been, and they would have been familiar. They would have familiarized the Jews with the stories of chaos and the goddess Chaos and the goddess Nemesis and all this kind of thing, and the Titans, you know. And so, yeah, I really do believe that that's what drives me. And I have to say, with a huge amount of satisfaction. There's nothing fearful about it. There's nothing doom about it. It's like, I feel like a tremendous, it's almost actually exciting and exhilarating a lot of the time. And that's the synchronicity thing as well. And that's also the natural law thing. I'm being told, yeah, you're on the right path. And that's the message I would leave with people. If you fell into the New Age trap, don't blame yourself. It's just like becoming a religious nut for a while. Don't blame yourself. It's part of your initiation. The important thing is that you got out the other side, and no matter how little you know, at least you're trying to move along a path of enlightenment. And Rome wasn't built in a day, and the first journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. So don't punish yourself if you ended up, on all that nonsense. It was part of the process. You're now on your way to true enlightenment. You may not get it in this lifetime, but remember, you're coming back.
And on that note, we'll leave it. So thank you, Thomas. And thank you, everyone, for listening and being with us today. I'm going to leave all the contact details for Thomas in the description below, where you can reach out to him. Anything you'd like to say goodbye, or anything to add, Thomas?
People want to learn more about my work. I've written about 10 books on all the stuff I've spoken about in this thing. You can get them on Amazon and Lulu and everywhere. World of Books, they're all there. You can even get them in some bookshops. I have a YouTube channel called Beyond Room 313, where I talk about the stuff we spoke about mostly today. And that's a good one for what this show covers. I do others. I have another channel on YouTube, but it's more like vlogs and stuff like that, and rants and comedy. I've done stand-up comedy. That's a great thing too. I always remember to have a laugh. Don't take yourself too seriously. And so that's it. And off the record now, would you mind if I put this video on my channel too, and I'll put all the links back to you?
Yes. I'll send you the recording. Shall I stop recording now?
Yeah. When it's finished and done, if you send it to me, I'll give you an email. Or even if you upload, are you going to upload this to YouTube?
I am.
Yeah, I can grab it there even, and then download it onto my computer. And what I'll do is I'll put all the links back to your channel, because